welcome to today's video. This is going to be all about the difference between the major pentatonic scale and the minor pentatonic scale, when to use each of these scales. This is something that confused me as a young player who didn't really understand much about music theory. So my hope with this video is that I can eliminate some of that confusion for those of you that may be feeling those same feelings of confusion and frustration surrounding the use of both of these scales. So I'm going to start by first demonstrating the first position of the major pentatonic scale. After that, I'll demonstrate the first position of the minor pentatonic scale. So here's the E major pentatonic scale in its first position. Here's the E minor pentatonic scale in its first position. Now, if you don't know much about music theory, what you've probably taken from watching me demonstrate those two scale positions is that I've taken the exact same scale shape or pattern or box and just moved it up to play the minor pentatonic, which is technically true. But let's abandon the idea of shapes and boxes and visual patterns for now and focus on the theory. And don't worry if you don't know much about music theory, I'm going to do my best to explain it in simple terms. I like to think of pentatonic scales as being skeletons for larger scales. So I think of the major pentatonic scale as a skeleton for the major scale. Now, the major scale is a 7-note scale. Sounds like this. This is the E major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, the E major pentatonic would take the first note, the second note, the third note, the fifth note, and the sixth note from the major scale. So it's just taking 5 of the notes from the 7-note scale. Now the names of those intervals would be the root, major second, major third, perfect fifth, and major sixth. If you don't know anything about intervals, you can go back and watch some of my other free videos that I have on my YouTube channel. I talk a bit about intervals in some of those, but if you want a really comprehensive overview of intervals and the minor pentatonic scale, the major pentatonic scale, the major scale, natural minor scale, if you want to know how to understand all of these concepts and actually apply them to your playing to become a more confident improviser, then check the link in the description below because I have 50% off coupons for my online guitar course, Bulletproof Guitar Player. Okay, moving on, and the minor pentatonic scale is a skeleton of the natural minor scale, which is again another 7-note scale. So here's the E natural minor scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The minor pentatonic scale takes the first, the third, fourth, fifth, and 7th notes from the natural minor scale. So the specific intervals would be root, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor 7th. Now you could actually use both of those scales in one song. So if you're playing a song in E major, you could use the E major pentatonic and the E minor pentatonic. And I'll come back to that later. But the difference between the two scales is basically the notes that follow after the root note, or the intervals that follow after the root note. So let's abandon scale shapes again and positions for now. And let's just look at those two scales on one string. So here is the E major pentatonic scale on one string. Now here's the E minor pentatonic scale on one string. So you can hear that the E major pentatonic scale, the intervals that follow the root note give it this happy major tonality. So that means it's better suited to major progressions. And the intervals that follow the minor pentatonic scale give it this sort of cool, badass sound. So it's more suited to chord progressions with a minor tonality, but it can be used over major progressions as well, and we'll come to that. So at this point in the video, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, great, I know how both of these scales are constructed now, but how can I actually use that information, and how do I know when to use which scale? Well, as I just mentioned, you could use both of those scales in one song. So for example, let's play over a progression in E major. So that progression is in E major. It has a very clear sort of happy sound to it. You can use both the E major pentatonic scale and the E minor pentatonic scale over that progression. And how that works is you're going to want to stick to mostly a major tonality when you're soloing. So you would use the major pentatonic scale and the major scale for the most part. But what you can do to give it a bit of variation is at times throw in some minor pentatonic licks that resolve to a major tonality. And that last bit is very important. That's what makes throwing minor pentatonic licks into major progressions work. It's when they resolve back to the major tonality. So now I'm going to demonstrate everything I've just told you. I'm going to improvise over a backing track with that chord progression that I just showed you. And I want you to listen to how I start out with mostly a major tonality using the major pentatonic scale and the major scale. But at times I'll drift off into the minor pentatonic scale and resolve back to the major tonality of both the major pentatonic and the major scale. Now, what is it that I'm doing there to move between the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic scales? I'm using the major third interval of the note E, just the interval of the note E. So the major third of E is the note G sharp. I am using that note as a pivot point between the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic. Now again, this is something that I talk about in a lot more detail in my online course, but for now, I'm just going to give you two licks that you can use to get started with using the major third interval of the key as a pivot point between the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic scales that share the same root note. So the first one is going to move from the major pentatonic scale to the minor pentatonic scale. It goes like this. So to play that, you're going to start at fret 9 on the D string. So you're going to go 9, 11, then 9, 11 on the G string as well. Slide up to fret 13. Now fret 13 here, this is our major third interval. That's the note G sharp. So this is our pivot point. So once we reach that, we go 12, 14 on the B, and then 12 on the high E. Now everything up until this point has been major pentatonic. But then the next part, we go like this. So we pick fret 15 on the B string, which is the minor 7th found in the E minor pentatonic scale, and we bend it up a tone to the root note. So we go, reach the pivot point, continue to play major pentatonic, and then end with a minor pentatonic sound. So that's the first one, that's going from major pentatonic to minor pentatonic. Now let's do the opposite. Here's a lick that moves from the minor pentatonic and resolves to the major pentatonic. So we're starting at fret 14 on the D string, then going to 12, then 14, 12, 10 on the A string, 12 on the low E, then we're going 10 on the A string, and then we're hammering on to fret 11. Now this note here, fret 11 on the A string, that's also the note G sharp, so that's our major third interval, meaning it's our pivot point. And now we're going to go and resolve to the major pentatonic. So we're going to go 9 on the G string, so we end on the root note. So there you have it. Those are two licks that you can use to get started with using the major third of the key as a pivot point between the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic scale. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and click subscribe below. If you have suggestions for videos you'd like to see on this channel, in the future, just drop a comment below and I'll take your suggestions on board. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.